Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the SKYLIT Books podcast series. Today we have another edition of SKYLIT, our author discussion series. I'm Justin Remer, your host for this episode, and our guest is film journalist and critic Marya E. Gates. She is the author of the new book Cinema Her Way, Visionary Female Directors in Their Own Words. If you're downloading this podcast on release, Marya is hosting a trio of film screenings in the greater Los Angeles area roughly a week from now. SKYLIT Books is sponsoring the last of these screenings at one of our favorite venues, Vidiots in Eagle Rock. The day is March 21st. The film is Me and You and Everyone We Know. Marya will be signing copies of Cinema Her Way and discussing the film with director Miranda July. This showing has already sold out online, but standby tickets will be available. So you might want to take your chance on those. She will be at two other screenings that same weekend. If you want more info on those, just check out her website, Marya E. Gates, MaryaEgates.com/Cinema Her Way for all the info on those dates. All right, well, enough stalling. Let's go to the discussion. What do you look for in a film? What draws you in?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm a big fan of thematics, just part of what a lot of my interview questions were revolving around. But just in general, I like a film that goes, because I was a lit major in college, I did comparative literature, right? So I like a film that's working on like multiple levels. Like if it's flashy visuals, that's not enough. If it's like interesting characters, okay. I want to know that you can do like flashy visuals, sense of world, and you're like dealing with something. Like you have a point of view.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I tend to be, as on my critic side, I tend to be a bit harsher on a lot of films. A lot of films that I think don't, like maybe they are well made, but they don't have anything to say. And then I'm a little bit easier on films that I think have something to say, and maybe the filmmaking's not there. Because, you know, it's usually budgetary with the filmmaking. And you can learn to be a better filmmaker or get a better budget. But I don't know that having a point of view on life is something you can necessarily learn, especially by the time you've gotten, like if you've gotten a feature film budget and you still don't have a point of view on life, I don't know if you're ever going to, you know?
I mean, do you... I guess by the time this goes up, it'll be old news, but like, are there any of the Oscar films that like appeal to you right now? Or
yes, I think one of those films is a surefire masterpiece, and that's Nickel Boys. I think,
agree. Yeah.
Yes, I think it is. I think every single element of that film has a thematic point. Specifically, and I've been championing him for years because he's, I think, my favorite working DP. Jomo Frey is like doing stuff with his camera. He's not just making pretty pictures or like framing things nicely. He's really thinking about what is this frame saying, telling the audience about the point of view or emotions of the character. How is he going to immerse you in how they see the world? And that's what he does. And I can't say that for most filmmakers. I mean, there are quite a few, but like, I think a small percentage, because as you know, there's like thousands of filmmakers. Right. I think he's a very intentional filmmaker. And I think Ramel Ross, his previous film, Hale County This Morning, This Evening, was one of the first films I'd ever seen set in a rural place that resembled the rural place I grew up. I grew up in rural Northern California, but a similarly like dirt road kind of like I lived on a literal dirt road at the edge of town. And that film was one of the few films I'd ever seen that really captured what that's like without judging it, without having an idea of what it was. It was just you were immersed in the experience of these kids. And it also captured the tension, I think, that a lot of people have with small towns where there's some magic there, but also it's limiting. So you don't hate it and you don't love it. It's, you know, it's one of those things. I feel like that film just really captured that because he's a really empathetic guy who's interested in the point of view of other people. And so him mixing with Jomo was just like, and then Jocelyn Barnes, who co-wrote it, is a really perceptive chronicler of the human spirit as well. And so I just feel like it was like a film firing on all cylinders. I wish it had gotten more than 2 nominations. I think that's unfair.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, because he didn't even get nominated for cinematography, right?
No, he did not. And at least one film on that 5 is, in my opinion, garish. So without any actual intention, I feel, in what it's doing. Like it garish and like just throwing spaghetti against the wall, and as boggles the mind. And then last year, Jomo Frey, or 2 years ago, Jomo Frey did All Dirt Road's Taste of Salt, which I also thought was a phenomenal film and a wonderful pairing of a poetic filmmaker with an empathetic DP, and they created magic. So, and Jomo also did a film, a Midwestern film. I'm here in Chicago, so I got to shout this out. A Midwest film called Runner that I don't actually think has been released yet. I think it's still like in limbo, but it's one of the best films to really capture like the bleak beauty of like a gray Midwest day. I just think he's just a great filmmaker. Any film lens by Jomo Frey, I will be watching.
Nice. Yeah, no, I wasn't aware of his work before this film. So yeah, I'm excited to check it out too.
I told him, I saw him at New York Film Festival, and I told him I'd seen every film he'd shot. And he said, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, no, he's a really humble guy. I was like, no, you're so good.
Oh, that's
funny.
Great.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the book. Let's talk about Cinema Her Way. Or at least let's talk about the background of the book, because I know this reaches back at least a decade. So Can you talk about that stuff?
Yeah. So I've lived in LA twice. I do not live there currently. I'm sort of one of those come there, go back kind of people. But when I lived there the first time, I was working at various facets of Warner Brothers. And in 2014, I'd moved over to Rotten Tomatoes. Warner Brothers owned them. So it was very aware of every single film being released, at least in the Los Angeles area, because it was my job to tweet out the Tomato Meters scores. And I knew there were a ton of films directed by women that were at least playing in LA that weren't being reviewed, weren't being seen. This idea that there, are only like 10 films by women a year is not true. The main thing is that the studios don't hire women, and that the films that are being made by women are not reviewed and they're not seen. And so they don't end up on the list of the highest grossing films, right? So it's less, in my opinion, that there aren't women making films. It's more those films are not being covered. Those filmmakers, people are not aware of them. Mm-hmm. So around that time, I just got really frustrated at like, it was the beginning of Marvel taking over the space, but it was pretty bleak. Most of the studio films were garbage, and I was just feeling really like bored, I guess, and slightly angry. And so, and then I think there was several best of lists. There wasn't a Sight and Sound one, but there was several best of lists that had like one film directed by a woman, and they were like, we did it. And I hated, that made me really mad. I used to have this hashtag make better lists. Then if there were a few outlets that were like, we need to champion women, and they would list like 10 filmmakers, and it was the same 10 filmmakers over and over. And I'm like, well, this is not helping anybody. Like, I'm a marketer. I understand people need to hear somebody's name 16 times before they know it, but you can't just repeat the same 10 names, like repeat at least 100 names 16 times, maybe. I don't know. Yeah. So there's a lot of frustration. So I decided to, as a social protest / growth, as a film connoisseur, I did a project called A Year with Women, where I watched only films directed by women for the whole year, except during Noirvember, where I watched films written by women for Noirvember, because it was a bit harder to find 30, at the time anyways, classic noirs directed by women. I do have a list on Letterboxd now of like 65 films directed by women that I consider noir. So if I wanted to do it again, I could actually do that properly. But
nice.
I was a novice. I was still learning. I'd seen a lot of films directed by women, but I had a lot of gaps. I hadn't seen John Dillman until that year. I hadn't seen some of the filmmakers who were featured in the book. I was introduced to their films, or at least the breadth of their films during A Year with Women. And when the year was over, I just kept watching films by women, kept like telling people like, we need to review more. But because of like job things, I moved from LA to Atlanta to work at TCM and Filmstruck. And launching Filmstruck took a lot of my brain energy. So I wanted to write a book, but I just didn't have the time. And I took that sort of same passion and convinced the programmers to program more films by women on Filmstruck. So that was good. But by the time I got them to do a dedicated monthly highlight, that was right when we got the plug pulled on Filmstruck because we were too niche. So that was a very hollow triumph. We got a month of films directed by women. And it was out. Then I moved to Netflix and I moved back to LA, worked at Netflix, marketed a lot of their films directed by women. Part of the reason I wanted to work there is they, of the streamers, tend to hire the most women. But again, they don't really market those films well because they're usually the smaller films and they don't get reviewed. One of the films we talked about in the book, Rescued by Ruby by Kat Shea, I think still only has, 7 reviews, and that movie came out 3 years ago.
Wow.
But eventually I left that because if anyone's listening who's worked in marketing, you know that if you do about 10 years in marketing, that's like 40 years in any other industry. And so I got I just couldn't do it anymore. And that gave me the time to like really focus. And around the same time, my agent, Nikki, emailed me, and she wasn't my agent at the time. She emailed me. I was in the middle of covering Toronto International Film Festival, and I was in my spam folder looking for a ticket for Dear Evan Hansen that had ended up in my spam folder where it belonged. But in there, I found this email from Nikki. I don't know why it went to spam. I'm really glad I found it. She was like, I love you on Twitter. Do you have a book idea? And I was like, yes, I do. And so the original concept, which much like Filmstruck was dubbed too niche, was I wanted to profile 365 different female filmmakers from throughout the history of time. Yeah. Like a half a page, whatever, a day, so that you could, it was an broad overview, but you'd get a large number of women. Because I do think the biggest misconception 10 years later is still that only a handful of women make movies. Because they report on the 12%, and then people are like, oh no, there's no women. And it's like, no, there's literally thousands. Like every year I watch probably 400 films directed by women. So almost all from different filmmakers. So it's like, there, you will never run out. But when Rizzoli came on board, they really liked this interview series that I had been doing. I started it at Moviefone, and then it got moved over to RogerEbert.com, where I interview a female filmmaker every month about their film. Sometimes it's a new release. Sometimes it's a repertory. Like February, I interviewed Zainabu Irene Davis, whose film Compensation is having its very first theatrical release 25 years after making its festival debut. So, wow. Yeah, she had one of those buried films. So it was a real honor to talk with her. But Rizzoli thought they could sell. They loved the idea. They wanted to highlight women. They were really on board, but they thought it would sell better / be a more interesting book for a wider swath of people if I actually interviewed the women and like got their stories, which ended up being a lot more work. Yeah. I ended up with 19 because I was aiming for 20, and I had a few filmmakers who were going to maybe be that 20th spot. And then my deadline came and I was not able to coordinate. And the publisher was like, you already have too many pages. It's fine. So oh, wow. They were like, no, we got to cut some of it anyway. So you're good. I'm like, okay. But I also like 19 because it's an odd number, and I like odd numbers. So yeah. Well, yeah. That was one of the questions that I had, was just like, how did you settle on the form? Because there is so much history as well as like current filmmakers that are forgotten, like history that's forgotten, and then current filmmakers that aren't trumpeted enough. And I like that this is all people who are working. Yeah. I think one of the strengths, and I'm glad Rizzoli had this thought, was I do think, and this was really evident as I was researching some of these women who made films earlier, like in the 70s, 80s, early 90s, a lot of these filmmakers were not interviewed like filmmakers. You go through like a Scorsese or Tarantino or somebody, and there's a lot about their filmmaking process, right? You go and look up some of these other filmmakers, and it's like, what's it like to be a woman? And that's it. There's Bomb Magazine used to do really good filmmakers interviewing filmmakers, and there's like a great, I think it's Alison Anders, Betty Gordon conversation. It's one of the few that I found where they both got to talk about being filmmakers. Yeah. So I do think it's helping fulfill sort of a gap in terms of looking at filmmakers, like women who make film, who have robust filmographies that are worthy of study in that sense. That's why I wanted to talk with women who'd made 3 or more films, to sort of have that broad like growth as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
Some of these women like Martha Coolidge has been making films literally for 50 years. She just had her last film was like 3 or 4 years ago. But also you get bits of history because like Martha Coolidge was the first woman president of the DGA. So you get a little film history, broad film history in just her story. So I feel like the goal of the book to sort of adjust the way we think about women who make film also was hit better by having the women talk about their own, work. If that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. And was the selection dictated by who would talk or who you thought would be interesting to talk to? Or
that's a great question. I started out with 100 names because obviously I started out with 365 names. Obviously,
Right.
That was the original one. Then I whittled it down to 100 who I thought would maybe talk to me. And then the original goal from the publisher was 20 to 25. I was like, 25 is not going to happen. I don't think you know how hard it is to like get on someone's schedule. But I was like, 20 is a good goal. So I started with a handful of women that I was actually friendly with. I've known Alice Anders for 15 years, I think. So I knew she'd say yes. And she's the nicest person. And then Isabel Sandoval, I was acquainted with through Twitter and a lot of mutual friends. Susan Seidelman, I've known for 10 years. So like the three of them I knew would say yes. Everybody else is kind of a gamble. And I wanted to have sort of a mixture of filmmakers people would know. So like I wanted Jane Campion. I ended up interviewing her actually for my column at rogerebert.com. And then Chaz Ebert was very gracious in letting me reprint that interview. All the other interviews are fresh for the book. But I wanted to have, a few names people would know, like Jane Campion, a few names like Gina Prince Bythewood, who has made, like The Woman King was a big breakout hit.
Yeah.
A few people maybe that people had forgotten about, like Kat Shea, who I think is fascinating. But, other than maybe Poison Ivy, I think she's people think she's made one film. She's made like 8 films.
Unfortunately, that's the only film of hers I know. So, yeah.
No, she has amazing films. I love talking to her. But she also worked with Roger Corman, so I got some oral history about Roger Corman, which I think goes beyond just her filmography. Then, I wanted someone like Betty Gordon, who mostly makes independent experimental films, to get that perspective. Lizzie Borden's a feminist filmmaker. Her 3 films are stridently feminist, very angry films. I love them. And then someone like Marielle Heller, who's mostly worked in the studio system. Like what's that been like for her over 4 films? Mm-hmm. So you get a broad scope of both like generations, types of filmmaking. I was aiming to have a full documentarian in here, but that was one of the filmmakers who I wasn't able to get on the schedule in time. Mm-hmm. So that perspective is limited, but some of these filmmakers like Gillian Armstrong, she did make a series of documentaries following women growing up from age 14 through, I think, 42, something like that. So like I did get some documentarian perspective as well. But I think it's gives you a nice mixture of like, there isn't one like woman's film. There isn't one kind of woman filmmaker. Yeah. Every kind of film you might like has been made by one of these filmmakers.
Yeah. Yeah. That was something I was curious about too. If there was the conscious effort to be like, it's not just going to be dramas or melodramas. There's comedy, there's action, there's all kinds of film.
A little bit of everything. A lot of television film too. Julie Dash, I think, is somebody people think only made Daughters of the Dust, but she's actually made several television films, including an erotica. So it was really fun to talk to her about trying to keep her voice while making like cable television films.
Yeah.
I thought that was really fascinating. And then, I told everyone I wanted to talk to them about thematics and process. But as you know, in talking to anybody, eventually bits of biography comes out like naturally. So anything that they revealed to me about their personal lives or their feelings of being in the industry was not really pronged by me. It just came up in conversation naturally, because I didn't want it to be another what's it like to be a woman. But if they wanted to talk about that because it was important to them, I wanted to give a platform for that, those kind of revelations.
Yeah. Were there any surprises like through the discussions that you just weren't expecting anyone to say? Oh,
yes. There are, I don't want to spoil it because I think I want people to read the book, but a couple of these filmmakers did share some, I think, painful memories about working with certain men. one of whom is not dead, but several of whom are dead. And the women said, they're dead, I'm going to talk about them now. That I was not expecting that. I didn't really want to prod on some of the difficult men in the industry because it's painful stuff. But a lot of these women were really open to share like what it was like working with some of these men who were not conducive to them thriving as filmmakers. And even Gillian Armstrong, who didn't have any outwardly like awful, men that people know of, she, as a trailblazer, she was the first Australian woman to direct a film in 50 years, I think. There was so much sexism when she was filming. Like, she went to film school with the likes of George Miller and the guy that directed Dead Calm. Oh, I'm forgetting his name, but Philip Noyce. She went to film school with these guys. That whole new Australian New Wave. She's not often included with the Australian New Wave when there's retrospectives, which I think is not right. But also, they could make a first film and fail. And she talks about the pressure of if Philip Noyce made his first film and it failed, fine. He can make another one. All men are fine. If Gillian Armstrong, the first woman, makes a film and it fails, all women have failed. Right. And that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
But then obviously it didn't fail. Her film, My Brilliant Career, went to Cannes and it was great. And then she got wined and dined in Hollywood. But then in Hollywood, people treated her like this one executive took her out to lunch and then wouldn't look her in the face. Because he looked at her boyfriend the whole time.
Wow.
but asked her questions. He just could not look a woman in the face. So they shared stories like that. Mira and I shared some really, I think, profound stories about what it was like to live in New York City right after 9/11 and not be a white person. Yeah. There's just a lot of really, I think, heartfelt stories that I was unprepared for, I think, a little bit. I've done a lot of interviews, so I know that things come out. But I am just really impressed by how open these women were with their stories and willing to share.
Is it easier for you or harder for you, with the experience that you have, talking to filmmakers whose lives or whose films have impacted you for most of your life? Because you talk about how Little Women is your favorite film, and Gillian Armstrong is right there.
Yeah. I feel like that was maybe harder. Yeah. Because I have loved her film for so long, and I actually could not. But she was the third person I interviewed, and I could not believe it. I was like pinching myself. Yeah. And she talked to me for 3 hours, which I was also not expecting. And she sent like follow-up stories because she thought of more things after, she was thinking back about what she said. And yeah. It was, I think, personally like easy in that I know her filmography well. Yeah. Hard in that I was like, I really don't want to mess this up. I love her so much. But I think each one was difficult and easy in differing ways. Because the filmographies are all so specifically singular to the filmmaker that I had to do a lot of research on everybody. Because even with Gillian, whose films I've seen Little Women 300 times at least. But I hadn't read a ton of interviews with her. So I wanted to make sure I didn't have her repeat things she'd said. I wanted to be able to dig deeper. And I kind of wanted to do that with everybody. So reading thousands of interviews or whatever for 2 years was, I have a folder that's just full of a lot of URLs and a lot of page numbers. And I guess it was all a little stressful at the end too, when I would send the finished transcripts to the filmmakers. Cause I'm like, I don't know if this happens with podcast interviewing or not, but a lot of times you'll say something and you look at it in print and you're like, I didn't say it like that or whatever. And you're afraid that they'll cut things or, they'll hate the whole thing and scrap it. And so there was a lot of I took a lot of antacids during the week of approval week, because I was like, these are so good. Please don't slash everything. But only a few things got cut, and that's fine. Some of these, I tend to get really niche with my questions sometimes. And if you're listening and drinking alcohol, you have to take a shot every time I say niche. I wanted it. I didn't want it to be too niche that I'm the only one that's interested in the questions that I asked. So I was also trying to think, like, if I didn't know this filmmaker, what would I want to know in order to get into them? So that was partly why I opened every interview with the question, or almost every interview with the question, like, do you remember the moment you want to become a filmmaker? Because I feel like every filmmaker has a really specific, or most filmmakers have a really specific memory of, like, either when they fell in love with movies or when they were like, directing is a job I can do and want to do. And that, I think, for most film fans, if you read that and you go, oh, that sounds cool, I want to see what kind of film she made, right? I feel like that's a good, like, what do they call those party opener questions?
Yeah, icebreaker.
Icebreaker, yeah. I feel like that's a good icebreaker. Yeah. And then I got niche.
Yeah.
After that.
Well, I mean, that's a great point because, like, for instance, when I first got the book, I was sort of like flipping to filmmakers that like Mary Lambert. Like, I know her as the director of Pet Sematary, and that's pretty much all I know. Yeah. But I love her response to that question where she's talking about how she's confronted with this painting and she's like, well, I'm not going to do this. I think that what appeals to me about this is the communication of time and storytelling. Yeah. I actually really, I like the section on Mary Lambert for me personally, because she's someone whose career I don't know. And even just going through the filmography that you listed, like, I didn't know she did one of the Halloween Town movies.
Oh my God. I was so happy to ask about that, because I'm sure a lot of, at least millennials, may have come to her through Halloween Town 2. Right. And didn't even realize it. Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, Debbie Reynolds is in that movie, so it's a classic. But yeah, I mean, and then Gen X, might know her from Pet Sematary, but they might not know that she made the most iconic Madonna videos. I think a lot of people, I could not get those photos, the rights for those photos too much. But but I mean, I love how her career has this, like, all over the place trajectory. Lots of television, horror, Christmas movies, like, she's done a little bit of everything. But she's very specific about why she wants to, or how she tackles thematically, again, each film that she tackles, even though they're all very different and they all aren't necessarily quote unquote serious stories. Like, she finds something serious in the stories, which I think was also a really interesting way to approach the genre film. Because unless it's overly and outwardly and 100% political, like something like Get Out, I feel like genre films tend to be dismissed. And so that's why I really wanted to talk to her, because she mostly works in genre. Kat Shea mostly works in genre. And I think Kat Shea's films are incredibly feminist. She made like feminist stripper movies. They're great. Right. Her films were so distinct when they came out that she actually had a retrospective at MoMA to celebrate her first 4 films before Poison Ivy came out, because the film curator at MoMA at that time was a big fan. But she's somebody today, if you know who she is, you would never think, oh yeah, she would have a MoMA retrospective. But she did, because she was celebrated by at least somebody in her time. And I do think she's someone who there is an overarching, if you want to use the word, auteurist approach to cinema for her. And I think all of these filmmakers do have that. And I think it's rare for women to be considered auteurs. It's rare for women who don't necessarily, like, Sofia Coppola has an aesthetic, therefore she's an auteur. I don't think her aesthetic is what makes Sofia Coppola an auteur. I don't agree with that. I think a lot of these women are more like Howard Hawks, right? Where Howard Hawks made how many different genres? Right. But when you're watching a Hawksian film. And I feel with, like, Kat Shea, I feel with Gillian Armstrong, like, there's different kinds of films, but you feel their voice in each one. Same with Susan Seidelman. You watch her run in the 80s, and then, of course, she directed the pilot of Sex and the City. Like, they're all in conversation with each other. So getting back to Kat Shea, so I definitely knew Poison Ivy by reputation before I had seen it, and just assumed it was probably a bit trashy or whatever. But I agree, when I actually watched it, I was like, oh, there is a strong point of view here. Like, this is, like,
yeah, this isn't just genre trash.
Yeah. Yeah. And for people who like genre with a little bit of thought behind it, I recommend all of her films. I think Streets is really good. I actually really love her vampire movie that I think was made solely because they had the location and Roger Corman wanted something filmed there while he was paying for it. And
Sure.
she made a very like existential, soulful vampire who doesn't want to be a vampire anymore kind of movie. It's, I think it's called like Dance of the Vampire or something like that. It's got all those Roger Corman ones have cheesy titles, but just ignore the cheesy title and
Right.
watch it for the thematics.
Well, it's interesting too, because like, I feel like there's a sense that a lot of women filmmakers have almost had to be multidisciplinary. Like, I also think of like Agnes Varda, like that she's a photographer, she's a visual artist, she's creating installations, but like everything feels of a piece. Like when that box set of her films came out, I was like, this box feels like one piece. Even these,
with the little cats that are on the inside. Yeah, exactly. I was like, attention to detail in that box set, perfect.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of these filmmakers would agree. They quite a few of them are professors or photographers, or in Mary Lambert obviously is a painter. We talk a bit about her painting. She still paints. That's one of her outlets, just like David Lynch, because I think every one of these filmmakers is a creator, and they don't necessarily just express themselves through cinema, though I think each of them really love cinema, I think maybe best. But I don't know. I was really hoping to get a broad swath so that people will stop thinking there's only one way that women make films. That was the goal.
I think even just looking at the table of contents, I think that's pretty apparent, because there's the filmmakers that I know and I'm like, oh yes, of course, this person, but then other filmmakers I don't, and delving into those chapters or those interviews is like really nice, because I'm like, oh, more films for me to discover. So yeah,
and then if you're really ambitious, the Index has another, I think 300, and it was originally 365, but I think I kept adding some women, so it's got 368 or 69 additional filmmakers that you can explore if you want to.
Yeah.
For anyone who wants to do their own year with women, I think with that and the names all mentioned by the other women plus the 19 women, there's probably close to 400 filmmakers mentioned throughout the book if you could just keep going.
But what I also love about the list that you're talking about that's at the end of the book, is that it also silences like the film nerd who wants to be like, but what about, and it's like, don't worry, I've got 300 more at the end. Like, I've thought about this. It's not, I didn't take this lightly.
I will say, in terms of talking about my deadline again, there is one notable woman who's missing, and people who are like eagle-eyed will notice, and that is Coralie Frajat, which feels like an oversight because she obviously is one of the few women nominated for Best Director. I hadn't seen her first film. My deadline was long before her film premiered at Cannes. So her name's not in there, and I feel terrible because now I'm like, well, she's such an important filmmaker. But also at the same time, because she's one of the few women nominated for Best Director and Best Picture, I think you don't need my book to know her work, hopefully.
Right. Yeah.
But shout out / apology to her for my deadline cutting her out of the book. That is not a pointed personal, it was complete accident due to deadline.
Yeah, hopefully she'll understand.
Yeah, I interviewed her for my column though, so I have interviewed her in my body of work.
Nice. Excellent.
It's online.
There always has to be a deadline.
I know the deadline's really, it was so stressful because I did have a couple more filmmakers who really were interested, and I just I could not get on their schedules in time. And I'm like, damn, these would have been really great chapters, but it takes a while to actually publish a book, I've learned.
Is there a thought that there could be like an ongoing series of these, or?
It's definitely come up. I think it would be if Rizzoli loves this, if the sales are good and Rizzoli likes, what's happening, then maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I hope so. And
I at least know now what I'm getting into.
Sure.
When I signed up for this, I'm like, I could do it. And like, obviously I did do it, but like there was a lot of stress, a lot more stress than I think there would have been if I'd known what I was doing.
I see.
Yeah. So like, I know how to do an interview. I don't know anything about, I do now, but at the time I didn't know anything about like getting the rights for photos or literally actually how you put a book together. You know, I'm like an online writer.
How much input did you, exactly. How much input did you have into the design? Because we can't communicate on a podcast, but this is truly like one of the best looking film books I've seen in a while.
So the design was done by Kaylee Jankowski, who is a LA-based book designer. And my editor at Rizzoli recommended her and sent me to her website. And I looked and I was like, these are the most beautiful books I've ever seen. So I was like, absolutely, yes, like perfect. Because my editor, Sandy, really understood sort of the vibe I wanted, I think. And so Kaylee's the vibe. So Kaylee and I had a meeting and I sent her, I really wanted hot pink because one, I love hot pink. And two, when I did A Year with Women, I made my website hot pink because I wanted to force people to take hot pink seriously. Just because it's hot pink does not mean it's not serious. And I feel like I've proven that. Lots of people have proven that, but I wanted to keep proving it because I love hot pink. So I sent her a bunch of hot pink examples of books that I just thought looked really visually cool. Because in my proposal, I basically said what I wanted to make was I wanted to make a book that could serve as a primary source for scholars and like people who are on that side of film. But I wanted it to also be so cool looking that it might end up on some random person's bookshelf or coffee table because they just wanted a cool book. And then they've accidentally like learned a lot just because they picked up a really cool looking book. I had that in my proposal. I was like, the buyer of this book runs the gamut from, you know, university teacher to cool girl, and we're going to get her. and guy, like cool guy too. Cool everybody. And so she ran with that. And the hot pink is amazing. She found this foil that like, every different photograph of this book since it's been released, the foil looks different because the foil looks different in every kind of light. It's just like prismatic. I don't understand science, but whatever it is, it's amazing. In my apartment, it's on a bookshelf. Like I walk down the hallway, and at the end of the hallway, I can see it. It's like shining. It's amazing. It's so cool. So she designed the book. I picked out all the stills based on. At the end of the interviews, I asked the filmmakers like, if you had a moment or a feeling you wanted the three images to express. Now, I couldn't actually get every single image that they wanted because some of them weren't available as press images, you know. But I think I got close, and I got the feelings for sure. Like Gina Prince Bythewood specifically said she wanted stills that showed intimately epic. That's what she says her films are. They're intimately epic, and I hope I did that with her. I think I did. But and then Kaylee found the best way to put them together. And then Alex Kittle, who's a friend of mine who I've known, I think from Tumblr maybe for quite a while. She makes these amazing zines about women filmmakers, among other amazing art. And when Rizzoli suggested I have illustrations to show the filmmakers, like I was like, oh, I know exactly who can do that. She already does this. Like, perfect. So she made these beautiful illustrations, and then Kaylee used them in ways that I was not expecting. It was just a bunch of cool girls making cool stuff, I think.
Yeah. No, it's like I said, it's really appealing. And also, the hot pink is great.
Yeah, I think it's just the right amount of hot pink. I know we could have gone further. We could have had more hot pink. I think we have a nice balance between the hot pink and like the white space and the bold like black and the blues, and I'm really happy with how it came out. When it arrived, my partner Robert, he was like, "This looks exactly like a book you would make," and I'm like, "Yes."
Excellent.
This is what I want. I want it to look like it came out of my head. And have you ever been to the Billy Wilder Theater at UCLA?
Yes.
So you know how the interior is like hot pink and white,
yes,
and black.
Yeah.
I also sent that to her, and I said like the first time I went to a screening at UCLA, which was I think or one of the early ones I went to was directed by women thing programmed by KJ Ralph Miller, who's now at the Academy, but she used to be at Billy Wilder. And the first time I walked in there, I was like, this is what the inside of my brain looks like. And so I sent that to Kaylee also. And I was like, this is the vibe also. So shout out to whoever designed the interiors of the Billy Wilder Theater.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. All kinds of inspiration from that theater.
Yeah. I mean, that theater, when I lived in LA, when I worked at Netflix, I used to go there all the time because KJ was programming, and she programmed all this like amazing feminist cinema. That's how I saw Siesta, Mary Lambert's first film. She programmed that. She programmed, I don't even know what else, all kinds of amazing stuff. Now she's at the Academy programming amazing stuff. So shout out to women doing the programming also. Yeah.
Nice. Oh yeah. And also, jumping back a little bit. Yeah. That still of Siesta. Now it's like, oh shoot, I got to find that movie too.
Yeah. That's a film. I really wanted to include that image and talk to her about that film because it's one that's not, I think, widely available. I wouldn't have been able to see it if KJ hadn't programmed it. I don't think it's ever been on DVD in the United States.
Oh, wow. Okay.
If you do some Googling, you can find it. That's all I'm going to say because it's not strictly legal, but it's been released in like France and places like Europe. But it's a film I want back on people's radar. So I thought maybe if we talked about it, somebody who like at Kino or something or Vinegar Syndrome will read about it and be like, oh, we need to put this out. So that already works. The book hasn't even come out yet. And Vinegar Syndrome already put out Martha Coolidge's Joy of Sex.
Yeah.
So, and I got to write one of the essays for that. And I was like, yes, because when I watched it, it was one of the last Martha Coolidge's I hadn't seen. And I'd heard that it was not good. But I'd heard it was not good mostly from like, not men that I knew, just like men. It was a lot of male reviews like trashing it. And I watched it and I was like, because it's rooted in like a teenage girl's perspective. Like, I don't know. I think people wanted Porky's and she gave them this like feminist, like girl solidarity, bodily autonomy film. It's all about like how women should have, even teenage girls should have a right to like choose what to do with their future and their babies. It's a great film. So shout out to.
I'm psyched to check that one out. Cause also that same series, like started with Little Darlings, which I had not seen before, and which also I'm like the performances in that are so good, such a good movie.
I think that label's doing a lot to specifically raise up films by and or about women in a really wonderful way. And I have my wish list of films I hope they'll pull out. There's a great Jim Thompson adaptation. What is it called? The Kill Off by Maggie Greenwald, I think.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Has only ever been on VHS. I watched a VHS rip on YouTube. That's how I saw it. It's got Georgia Fox in it. It's so good. It's
nice.
So good. But it's like it's never been treated as a good film. It's just a small budget, great little grimy adaptation.
Yeah. I love
someday that one gets restored.
I love like hard boiled stuff, and I love Jim Thompson, so I will also be checking that out.
It's really good. That's my like if I had any film I could like save from the VHS dungeons and bring back on like I don't know if it needs a 4K, but definitely a Blu-ray. That would be the one. I want to resurrect that film.
Nice.
If anyone's listening who can make that happen, I will work with you. Make it happen.
Excellent. All right, so I think maybe for like a final thought, are there any new films or new filmmakers that you think really film lovers listening right now really should be checking out if they haven't already?
Yeah. There's a film that played at Sundance last year that I think is about to screen in LA soon called Tendaberry by Haley Elizabeth Anderson. It's wonderful. It's strange and weird and plays with time in ways that I think is really fascinating and I think speaks to like post-COVID anxiety in a really unique way and our like interconnected internet behaviors. I already mentioned Raven Jackson's All Dirt Roads Taste of Salt, but that's one of the best films I've like maybe ever seen. So and I feel like no one like I don't know that it had the best theatrical release. So and it's still not on Blu-ray because A24 like is really weird about what they put on Blu-ray and what they don't. And I love that film. What else is coming out? Oh, there's a great film that I think Metrograph Films bought called April. It's a film from Georgia, the country. I'm not even going to try to say the filmmaker's name because it's a very long Georgian name that I will butcher. But it's called April. It's coming out from Metrograph. And it's very much about like some of the same stuff that The Substance was dealing with in terms of aging women, but also about bodily autonomy and fighting fascism and all of those good things that are timely. And then there's another new film coming out in March called On Becoming a Guinea Fowl. And it's from the same filmmaker who did I'm Not a Witch. And it's sort of a, not quite satire, but almost sort of social satire about the ways in which elders sometimes hide abuse, and a new generation of women who are trying to sort of break that cycle and save the next generation from sort of sexual abuse. So it sounds grim, but it's actually very funny and strange. And I recommend that film. That played at Cannes last year.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love having new things to look out for. So this is great. This was mostly just for me. So
and actually, and a shout out in terms of older new thing. Crossing Delancey, one of my all-time favorite films, just got restored. It's so beautiful. Like I had the old DVD and that's garbage. I want to like throw it in the trash. The new like the cinematography is so warm and beautiful now, or not even warm. It's cool cinematography. It's got this cool, like, I don't even know how to explain it, but it's perfect. It's a perfect film. Joan Micklin Silver would have been in the book if she wasn't dead. She's in the book in my heart because she is one of those all hits, no skips kind of filmmakers. And I just think everyone should watch Crossing Delancey. So it's on the Criterion Channel, but also the Blu-ray has just come out. I'm sure they're doing like retrospective screenings also, and it's absolutely worth seeing.
Wait, speaking of retrospective screenings, you should plug the dates that you're doing in LA.
Oh, yes, I should absolutely do that. So I will be in Los Angeles on the 19th, March 19th at the Academy Museum with Allison Anders. We're screening a 35 millimeter print of Gas Food Lodging, which is one of the all-time great films. Really, really wonderful, like female gaze on some butts and jeans, which is one of my favorite sort of things in films. So, and then if you go down a little bit I think it's down the 5. I'm not really sure where it is, but I'll figure it out when I get there. In Santa Ana at the Frida Cinema. Never actually been to Santa Ana, so someone knows how to get there. Karen Kusama is going to join me to talk about her amazing LA noir film Destroyer with Nicole Kidman.
Oh, nice.
I love. And then on the 20th, so that's on the 20th, and then on March 21st, if you want to do like a three-peat, I will be screening Me and You and Everyone We Know with Miranda July at Vidiots. That has sold out, but there are walk-up tickets, so you can, maybe like wrestle with somebody to get one of the walk-up tickets, or bribe a friend who already has a ticket. I don't know. But I think that's going to be really, super fun. And Vidiots is just, it's all woman-run space, and it's just a wonderful place.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, we look forward to having you in LA. I hope everyone checks out the book because it is great. Like I said, it is one of the best looking film books and also one of the best written film books.
Thank you.
I've checked out in a long time. So thanks for chatting with me here.
Thank you for having me. SKYLIT is my favorite bookstore in Los Angeles. During the quarantine, I ordered from you guys so much that when I came back, when like the world was open again, the guy at the art book part of SKYLIT, he saw my name and he was like, "Oh, you kept us alive during quarantine." I was like, "I know, I bought so many books." Like, bless you guys. I sent a lot of books. It wasn't just for me. I sent a lot of books to my niece during quarantine, but I did spend probably an ungodly amount of money buying books from SKYLIT. You guys are the best.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the SKYLIT Books podcast series. We hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to check out the book featured in this episode, or others, please visit skylitbooks.com. If you're in the Los Angeles area, stop by for one of our live in-person author events. You can find a calendar on our website. If you like this podcast, leave us a review. It really helps us out. Our music is by Duck the Piano Wire. Till next time.